sitting in the passenger seat helping our eldest get her driving hours up while she was going for her driver's license, I witnessed one of the first times that she experienced a familiar reaction, you and I might know. It was when a person in front of her was driving and they were doing something erratically, all right? We got cut off. She reacted appropriately with surprise, bit of judgment, totally understandable. I do it all the time. Way more benign than when I was learning to drive. I was very, very, very verbal behind the wheel. Always upset, always angry at other people on the road. Everyone was in my way. No one else could drive well. Whoever designed this roundabout is a fucking idiot. I'd carry that resentment with me like a backpack full of used cat litter. Wasn't good. Now, after a few years of this, I was driving with a mate in the passenger seat. He was a bit older than me. He saw me do this. He said something. Tells me something that really sticks to me. It really sticks with me. And it's something that I said to G that day that we were cut off. He said, you know, you never know what kind of day someone else is having. Oh, right. They could be racing to the hospital to meet their partner, and one of their kids is just poleaxed themselves on the playground equipment. You know, they might have left the iron on. Their new lover has said, come on over, baby, if their new lover was Christina Aguilera. Now, sometimes that behaviour is very observable. Sometimes it's kept under wraps. My guest today is an open book when it comes to the kind of day that he's having. Rich Roll is one of the world's most renowned ultra-endurance athletes. He's been called, among other things, the fittest vegan on the planet. He's a best-selling author. He's a podcast god. He's a keynote speaker. He's an entrepreneur. Yet, even with all the public-facing accolades, Rich was struggling. Turning his back on the life that he formerly led as a high-profile entertainment lawyer, Rich pushed hard into making a space for himself and a name for himself in the world of not only endurance athletes, but as an advocate for health, for well-being, for a plant-based lifestyle. And you are about to hear that even when things were at their most public, at home, there were struggles that were beyond tough to overcome. But day by day, he did it. He continues to do it. Rich is an oracle of wisdom, and I'm grateful to call him a mate. It's taken a long time for me to get him on this show, a really long time, and I'm bloody grateful that we waited, because this is one of the greatest conversations that I've had in over 10 years of doing this podcast. I can't wait for you to hear it. G'day, this is Better Than Yesterday. We've been having conversations to make your day today better than yesterday since 2013, Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. We're here, Mondays and Wednesdays with a guest, Fridays here with you. I'm Moshe Ginsberg. I'm a podcaster. I'm a TV host. I'm an author. I'm a dad. I'm a stepdad. I'm someone who cleans up the dog poo that dog out the window is doing right now. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate that, buddy. And I'm really grateful to be a part of your day today. Another thing about me is that from 2005 to 2015, I lived in Los Angeles, in California. I'm in Sydney right now. While I was in Los Angeles, I met the remarkable human being who is Rich Roll. I was a long way from home, and I was yearning for something that felt like family. And Rich, along with his wife Julie and their kids, they were kind enough to let me into their lives, welcome me into their home. Their friendship, their support, that stuff that Rich offered me when I was really at my lowest is a huge reason why I am still here. Watching Rich build his podcast empire into the machine that it is absolutely inspired me to start my own show. It inspires me to push myself even further as he invents new ways to be a broadcaster in these ever-shifting times in media. It's hard to describe what Rich Roll means to me, but I think you're about to hear it in my voice. Now, if you're completely unaware of who Rich Roll is, allow me to bring you up to speed. It's fine. It's everybody's first time doing something. Rich Roll was a star of the Stanford University Swim Team. Eventually, however, alcohol and addiction played havoc with his life and his career. It was a path that led him to jails, to institutions, ultimately, at the age of 31, into rehab. Rich got sober, he got his career back on track. However, on the eve of his 40th birthday, Rich found himself 20 kilos overweight, breathless, and doubled over in pain at the top of a small flight of stairs. His level of fitness a very long way from his days as a competitive swimmer. What happens next is straight out of a Rocky montage. He went vegan. He got back in the pool. He started running regularly. And in less than 2 years, Rich was accepted into the invite-only endurance epic Ultraman. Ultraman is a double-distance Hawaiian Ironman, 515 kilometers of running, swimming, and cycling completed over 3 days, where he not only finished in the top 10, but recorded the second fastest swim split out of the contest. Not bad for a guy who didn't own a bicycle when he started training. It was the first time, but not the last time he'd compete in Ultraman. His success there led him to be named one of the 25 fittest men on the planet. Over a decade later, he was named the fittest vegan alive right after competing in the extraordinary Swedish swim run race Otalo, 75 kilometers, swimming between and then running across a total of 26 islands, tethered to his teammate, all in the brisk September waters of the Stockholm archipelago. Physical feats aside, Rich is a beacon of inspiration on so many levels. For me, his sobriety journey is one that I use as a catalyst to push myself to do better, to be better, to get better every day in this business of being in recovery. His family is remarkable. He's married. He and Julie raised 4 kids together, and everything that comes with blending families. That is something that they navigate with grace and with poise. He's also an incredible innovator. Behind the scenes, Rich is literally reinventing what it means to be a broadcaster in this modern world. And he's brave. When he changed careers, he deliberately chose to not pursue his law career, even though it offered a lifeline of funds when times were tight, because that would have taken him too far off the path that he was forging for himself. Rich is curious. His podcast is game-changing. He's a bloody great human being. Now, I'm so stoked that you get a chance to hear us speak like this today. I'm eternally grateful for having Rich in my life, and I'm stoked that he made time to come and see us while he was out here for work. I'm really happy that you get a chance to enjoy this. But if you are watching this, I do have to apologise. There was quite the clusterfuck with my cameras on the day that Rich came around, and some of my footage is quite blurry, quite ordinary, but Rich looks great. So don't you worry about that part. So if you can deal with my fuzzy face, I think you really dig this. Enjoy listening to what happened when Rich Roll came and sat with me just a couple of weeks ago. I haven't done a face-to-face in so long, man.
Really?
Yeah.
But this is your thing.
It used to be.
Yeah.
Like, this is all I ever did. In fact, I remember refusing to do stuff that wasn't face-to-face. And then pandemic and TV production shut down, and I was like, well, are we even going to be able to do TV again? You know?
Right.
And so
everything was up in the air.
Yeah. And so, well, I know this is an income stream that I can kind of count on. So
it's hard to keep track of all the different things that you have so many things going on. Like and now with the new like news show, live event thing, and the television shows, and this podcast, and this podcast seems to continue to like morph and change. And I'm like, does he have one podcast or does he have multiple with different names? And then I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah. I don't know how to put this to you, mate. Like, I learned a lot in my 10 years in Los Angeles. I learned a lot. And two of the most powerful things I learned was off my old manager. He's passed away now. But he's the guy, as an entertainment lawyer, previous life, you were an entertainment lawyer, you'd remember the name John Ferreter.
I do know that name.
He was the packaging god at WME.
Okay.
Right. He told me two things. He goes, one,
only you know how hard you've worked to make your dreams come true. And I was like, fuck, that's a good one. Because, I might not get a job, or I, might not win a thing or whatever. And I can say to people, I didn't get the bit. I didn't win the thing. They go, you tried. But I'm the one that has to lie in bed at night and go, I fucked around on my phone a lot instead of working on that, didn't I? And I have to live with that. And I'm the worst person, And the other one he said is like, I don't even care. Unless you host at 6 o'clock news, one day your show is going to get cancelled and you better be ready for that day. And I was not. And I ended up with no work and I ended up with nothing. And I was like, this is 2012. We were riding bikes together. And from that moment on, it's just like, okay, then how do I kind of percolate these things and see what's getting a bite? Okay, that's getting good. That's good. This is not so much. All right, but I'm glad I put that out there. Back away. Let's put something else in that spot. And that was also a lot of the stuff I learned when I was in Amsterdam was, there's like the 60, 40, 20, 10. So 60% of your time is you're working on that thing that's bringing the bread in. 40% is the thing like next year. 20 is 3 years. 10 is 5 years. But always putting that in, not letting those projects of 5 years from now dissipating.
But you're also in an industry where you have so little control. On some level, because it's not necessarily a meritocracy. It doesn't matter how much you work. Your job is to be prepared for the lightning bolt moments, so that you can kind of leverage luck or keep showing up so that you're improving your chances of being in a situation where something can happen. But there's a stripping of agency that can erode your soul. So for me, you have that like percentage rule, but it's really like, what are the controllables and what's out of your control?
Well, this is really it's an unbelievable time to be in my industry. And it's unbelievable, or, it's unbelievable. It depends on which way you're looking at it. Like if you're the old business model of, I took an insurance company, a motor car company, and a bank to lunch once, they signed off on the year's ad budget, we're done. Then it's unbelievable. But if you're like, all right, I sell this shit 6 weeks at a time, it's unbelievable, and it's moving to that different business model as the market fractures and streaming becomes, what it's going to be. And ultimately, it really is great content is the thing that is going to make the difference.
And to me, like what's happening in this little room in your basement is the thing that you have agency over and control over and that you own. So when I look at your career, I see somebody who has diversified how your talent is sort of exploited and monetized. With one foot in an old paradigm industry that you could say is sort of dying, right? Like network television, hosting these big shows that get massive audiences that obviously make you a household name in Australia, which is very good for business, but you have no control over that and no ownership over that. But that gives you a profile that allows you to build this thing that we're doing here and give you, a leg up on most people because we're both in a very privileged position that we've kind of been doing this thing for a long time. Can you imagine starting a podcast now? It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much name recognition. You could be a huge celebrity. Like trying to develop an audience in the podcast space now is extreme. Like if you're launching a show, extremely, extremely difficult. Doubling down on this thing that you own, that you can control, that you have agency over is more important. Like that would be my counsel to you. Like not that you don't know that and that you're not doing that, you can't count on the other stuff. But, I think what you're doing here and, with the live events and the conversations that you're having that are very similar, in many ways to the ones that I'm having, like that's the shit, man.
It really is. And even if this doesn't pay, having control.
The thing is, it should. It should be paying you more than any of the other stuff.
It should, and we'll talk about that off air. But not everyone listening is going to start a podcast. Not everyone listening is nearly or 50-something straight white guy. Yet what you're talking about is controlling the controllables, and I am doing something every week, a number of times a week, that keeps my skill set sharp. that keeps gives me a sense of, I'm saying this is getting me closer to the kind of job or the kind of work that I want, and it's keeping me in the direction of where I want to go. Now, that might be your cooking, that might be the way you're managing your household budget, that might be whatever. But having control over something every day or every week does give me a sense. Like I'm not just like at the tail of the hydra being flacked around by the waves of the market. Which does give me
waiting for the phone to ring.
Fuck that.
And
man.
I think to your point of kind of what's relatable to anybody who's listening to this, we both kind of had our dark moments of the soul. Your audience is very familiar with the mental health journey that you weathered, and the sobriety journey and all of that. And I have of course have my version of that. But when we were both kind of reckoning with how to crawl out of that and what to do next, we both pivoted to certain things in the same way. We both like doubled down on sobriety and meetings and all of that. And we both ended up spending a lot of time on our bikes. And there's something about that I think is very interesting. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what the right next move for myself is. I'm confused about the world. Why is this happening? All of that kind of stuff. There's something about just being alone with yourself with an elevated heart rate for hours and hours and hours every single day. That, while you're doing it, you're not exactly answering those questions, but that process puts distance between you and whatever you're grappling with or contending with in a way that allows kind of you to begin to figure out how to put the pieces together, or figure out at least like what the next right step is going to be, that will ever so slightly kind of alter your trajectory and maybe put you on a more kind of authentic path.
Just even the research around it, I'm not so familiar with it, but there is research around just moving forward through space just has a fundamental effect on our ability to process complicated emotions and things like this. I discovered I was early on the first time I dropped a bunch of weight as an adult. I was 19. I just went on walks. I was unemployed. I was just putting on heaps of weight, just eating shit food. I just started walking. And I think the first day I walked 800 meters, and it was like I fucking had to lay down. I was that unfit, But the next day I just walked a little bit more. And I started to discover that I started to feel better in my head as I walked a bit more. And, that's replicated so many times through my life. And I discovered at one point when I could still run, there was no problem that I took with me on a run that I didn't come back with a solution for.
Right.
Like nearly the moment that I put the key in the door going, I've got to that's what I'll do about that. Oh, all it took was 10 Ks, or all it took was 5 Ks, or 4. Doesn't matter. Same with a bike. There really is there's a lot to be said for, okay, here's all the raw material that I need. Perseverating on it's not going to help. I'm going to use that energy to just put one foot in front of the other for a while, or one hand in front of the other if you're swimming or whatever. And then somewhere between sets, or somewhere as you turn a corner, or somewhere as you jump out of the way of a car or whatever, just pops in.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that has to do with allowing your mind to quiet and making space for a different part of your brain to become activated. That is very counterintuitive, because you want to like push and push and push until you solve it. You can't solve it by sitting at home, like, ruminating and just like running this tape, right? Like you got to you need a pattern interrupt. And that space allows for something new to happen. Like, you come back from a run or a ride, suddenly that the stress that you feel around whatever predicament you're in is reduced, and you have some kind of like, so you're like, why didn't I think of that before, right? Like it's happened so many times.
But Rich, you don't understand. Like I'm fucking, I don't even have a pair of running shoes. I'm overweight. I got kids. I got no time for this shit. You would say that. You got free time.
Of course. Yeah, I get all that. It's like, do what you can, man.
That's it. And that's what I would say. I had to trick myself into that first 800-meter walk. I was so unemployed and so depressed and so just sitting there watching. This is how long ago it was, because there's no internet. So I'm just watching Sally Jesse Raphael. I've got triple G boobs and I don't know. It's like that was the kind of like just sitting there in the morning eating my Weet-Bix watching that. Going, what the fuck am I doing? I should really get off my fat ass. I had to trick myself, and I tricked myself, go, I'm just going to check the mail. Because at that point in my life, the mailman coming was the most exciting thing that could happen in the day, all right? Because there's fucking nothing happening. And so I went to go check the mail. But instead of walking down to the mailbox, which is the right-hand side of our driveway, I walked to the left. And there was a little block, it's 800 meters. So I walked to the left, and 800 meters later, I picked up the mail. And I went, see, I just went to check the map. And
was that when you were living in Venice? Or
no, I was in Brisbane. That was years ago.
This is way back. You're talking way back.
Way back. That was kind of when I first kind of unlocked how moving my body and being physical from a place of extraordinary lack of fitness. I haven't been that unfit since, I don't think. But I had to trick myself into it. And it was only 10 minutes, but it made a world of difference. And then it's just like a little bit every day. But speaking of like processing difficult things, luckily I got a chance to ride bikes with you a number of times. And I think the important thing that we did kind of not talk about is that where we rode our bicycles, there was a lot of nature around, and that helped a lot. Being in the mountains, being in the canyons, riding past horses and things like that, which is lakes, even though they were man-made lakes. It was nice. I remember going for a ride with you, and we were going up a hill somewhere, and you were very patiently waiting for me as I complained that my gears were going along. Fuck, dude. She was so fucking fit. And what's going on, man? He goes, yeah. They're supposed to be coming to repossess my car today. You remember that day?
I do, yeah. But talk more.
It was
like I'm trying to.
It was
I have a vague recollection.
Early,
of that.
you were still recording the podcast in your garage. So early on.
Yeah.
You were trying to piece some stuff together.
Right.
You were honestly saying to me, and I've heard you talk about this, and I'm happy to cut it out if you don't want to, mate. But
no,
I have heard you refer.
I'm an open book.
You've referred
stuff.
to this time. Yeah. You've referred to this time in your life on your show a number of times. We actually didn't know where the next mortgage payment was going to come from.
We hadn't been paying our mortgage at all at that point.
That's right.
There was no next. The house was a ticking clock before they came for the house. Yeah, that day they were coming for my car.
That's right.
But the house repossession was very much on the horizon.
And
this is after Finding Ultra came out. This is after starting the podcast. This is, people are like, oh, the pod, my life is an embarrassment of riches right now. Like it's absurd. I just can't even believe that I get to live the life that I'm living right now. But I think the thing that gets missed is like how unbelievably challenging it was for not 6 months, not a year. It went on for like almost 7 years of just not knowing if I could even, keep the lights on at all, and just waiting for the house to get taken away.
It's not just you. We're talking about little kids. We're talking kids in primary school.
Yeah. With children and being, the head of the household, and with a law degree that I could easily leverage to go back and work, at some firm and get, 6 figures.
Just over here, Rich. Come on, mate. Put the shirt back on. Put the shirt back on. It's a tailored shirt.
Yeah.
It's got
that wolf on the shoulder every morning and every night and every day. And it was Julie who's like, no fucking way. Like, we've come too far. Like, you're seeing this thing through. Like, this is she calls it your divine moment. Like, are you going to demonstrate the courage and the faith and the conviction of what you want to manifest, or are you going to, pivot and like scurry back to what feels safe and secure? And honestly, I was like, I'm scurrying. This is too painful. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is, irresponsible. And certainly, there were plenty of friends and colleagues and family members who were quick to, remind us of all of that. Like, you find out who your friends are. Like, people would say to Julie, like, what is your husband doing? Like, you don't have to be in this. And and certainly other people, telling me like, hey man, like, are you okay? Like, what's happening here? Like, what exactly is your plan?
Yeah.
And
is that your 93
They weren't wrong. It's not like, fuck you. It's like, hey man, I need to really think about this. Like, so like having cars repossessed. I mean, I've told this story before, but it got so bad that we didn't have like the $80 to prevent the garbage collector from taking our bins away. So we didn't even have trash bins, and we would have to take our garbage. Our cars have been repossessed, but we did have this like ancient minivan that had like, I don't know, 250,000 miles on it. And we would put our garbage in the back of that and drive around and find like those dumpsters that just are by construction sites or behind grocery stores to like dump our garbage. It's like, that's gnarly, especially when the two little boys are in the back seat and this is what they're seeing. This is what you're modeling for them.
And this is, I'm a published author. I've got a podcast. I'm all over fucking Outside Magazine. Yes, I'm like, here's a picture of me running like a gazelle across the Santa Monica Mountain.
Right. The dissonance between those two things, like how people were perceiving me in the world and the actual reality of like how we were trying to survive day to day.
Yeah.
And heightened by the fact that I live in a really nice house. Like you've been to my house. Like
beautiful place.
It's like we were the poorest rich people. Like it's like we were like squatting in a house that we didn't deserve to live in, that we couldn't pay for, that was falling apart because we couldn't, we could barely just have rice and beans at the time.
Yeah.
And we were tested, all the way to the max. And it's that thing where it's like, hey man, I know I'm on the path I'm supposed to be on. Like, not to get too biblical about the whole thing, but it's like, hey, you're like, show me a sign, like anything. And like any opportunity, like, let me do that. Let me exploit that. Any speaking, you'll pay me $500. Like, I'm there. How do I get there? Like, and just slowly over time, like stringing those together. And then, a couple miracles occurring, including like at the very last minute, within 48 hours of our house about to be taken away, getting a refi so that we could stay in, like, and then just brick by brick, like piecing it together. I mean, I did the podcast for years without monetizing it. It wasn't, it was early podcasting days. So it was easy to kind of be at the top of the charts, but actually the audience wasn't that big.
No.
And the whole thing about ads and all of that wasn't even really like a thing yet, so anyway.
I lost money on this. I think it took me 6 years to make any money on this. I started spending money on it about 3 years in. So I was losing money on it the whole time. But without it, I wouldn't have a book. I wouldn't have a live show. I wouldn't have, like, it's the thing that got me more jobs than anything else. But it's fine to get up and say, here I am, here's my acceptance. I'm holding my fucking Golden Globe or my Logie or whatever going, and, thank you to this and thank you to that and blah, 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 love you. And you walk away. But that's not it. It's how do you get up on, October the 6th of year 4 of this, not knowing when it's going to end? How do you get through that day? Like, what's the pathway when you're faced with that kind of, you say you're looking for messages that I'm on the right path. The screaming messages are, you're not. Right. How do you get through that day? How do you align your partner, your kids, the people around you? And how do you get through the questions you're asking yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think on some level, you're in a bit of a crisis situation and you're just looking at the day through blinders. And again, it's back to what can I control? It's like, okay, I can like do my training so I can be mentally and physically fit. I can take care of that. That doesn't cost any money. I can make sure that I pick up the kids from school on time. I got gas in the tank. I can send out these emails. I can reply to these emails. I can create a piece of content. Like, it's all little things. Like, what can I do as I'm waiting for opportunities to arise to put myself in a position to reap the benefits of those? And it's really about, like, it's almost like a survival thing. Like, just, okay, maintain your neutrality, which is key. You can't be like reactive to everything or be in a panic state. And Julie would always say, like, you have to have this Jedi mindset. Like, what would Jedis they're not freaking out. Like, oh my God, what's happening? No, they show up and they're just like composed. They're neutral. How can you navigate this situation with grace and neutrality? And to your point, your story about having our car repossessed, I remember that evening when the guy showed up to take I had like this groovy orange Land Rover. It wasn't anything fancy, but like, I love that car. And the guy comes in and Julie comes out and greets him. Hey, what's your name? And so he's immediately like, he's just used to people yelling at him. Hey, do you want some tea? Come on in, take a seat. Let me make you, you're here to take the car, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, just, it's all good, man. Here's the keys. Do you have kids? What's your life like? Like, like, nobody treats that guy with any kind of dignity or respect.
Yeah.
He took the car. It's not like he didn't take the car.
Yeah.
But like, that's what a Jedi would do. It's like, I'm not going to, by being angry and resentful and frustrated and resisting, the suffering comes in the resistance. So how can you remove the resistance and comport yourself with that level of dignity, grace, and neutrality? That is what it's like to be a Jedi in those situations, and to really understand. And Julie would have to remind me of this all the time. Like, this is just shit. These are, this is just, it's material stuff. Like, I think what we weathered and went through would have fractured most marriages, but it actually brought us together. There was a Christmas morning where we had like no money and we couldn't buy gifts. So we went to like Walmart or Target and bought a bunch of white t-shirts and like white sneakers and some paints. Like, that's what we could afford. And so together we all like, made our own t-shirts for each other and stuff like that. And Trapper made a little video at the time that was really funny, that he would be embarrassed if it was on YouTube now, but I watch it all the time, and it ended up being like maybe the most meaningful like Christmas morning. Like, how can you create something good out of, this type of situation, and understand, like, look at it like a game. Like, this is a game, they want you to be reactive. They want you to crumble. They're like, oh, they took the car. The baller move is to not care, right? You know what I mean? And like, after a bunch of those, you start to develop a little bit of a strength around it, I guess. But I think, and so, yeah, and it went on way longer than I would have thought. But then, things started to slow. It's like, so we've crawled out of it, and that's many years in the past now. But the challenge for me more recently has been to really realize that for a long time, I was in this protracted state of like post-traumatic stress over the whole thing, because it was like such a crisis mentality for a long time. So once we achieved some financial stability, I was still like a maniac about like trying to build a podcast and like bring money in and like make it like a thing, because I was so panicked of being returning back to that place, like, because it was so traumatic for me, and so like letting go of like I can enjoy my life now. Like, I don't, like, it's good, and like, you work hard and that's fine, but like, you need to have a healthier relationship with your career.
I think you might have answered the question you asked me about why I've got so much shit going on, Rich. That's a part of it. That's definitely a part of it for me. But honestly, watching the two of you navigate that, and I consider myself very fortunate to not only know you, but also know Julie, and just have a relationship modeled, to understand that that's what marriage can be like. If Julie hadn't been there, and you were going purely on the skill set that you had prior to that, how do you think things would have ended up?
Oh, I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. I would have immediately pivoted 180 and run back to the, protective enclave of the law and like live the rest of my miserable days. None of it. And so
I've got a Porsche.
it's
an R8 Audi.
I would not have had my own, left to my own devices.
Yeah.
It would not have happened. I didn't have the conviction or the fortitude. It was really her strength that allowed all of this to blossom, which creates a bit of a predicament, because sometimes people misconstrue our relationship and they're like, oh, the woman behind the man, like, she's so amazing. She's just like, that's the worst thing you could say.
Yeah.
Like, it is tricky because like I have a much more of a public profile, but she's really the shit in the whole thing. You know what I mean? She's not the woman behind the man. Like, she's out in front of me on almost everything.
Yeah.
So
and it's not an uncommon thing that happens sometimes with people who are like yourself or myself. Eleanor Roosevelt is probably the greatest example around the fucking country. Well, no, he's a bit sick today. He can't see you. Let me take some stuff in there for you. No worries. Shut the door. Sort it out. This is what he said. He didn't.
Right.
But it happens. And Julie is an extraordinary person. But to talk about that sort of thing, I feel is kind of important. I mean, it's not like you at any point did I see you or Julie or the kids complain about it. And that is unbelievable that you were able to. I'm sure resentment popped up, and I'm sure you, try to, did your best to let it go, because you're not superhumans. It's going to show up, and down-regulating is a part of that, But to not let it happen to you is an enormous thing.
Yeah, it's the idea that it's happening for you and not to you. And listen, I'm not saying that I handled that, with total grace. It was really rough. And
people don't ever hear your angry voice. I've heard your angry voice. Yeah, You've got a good angry voice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to look back in the rearview mirror and like kind of lionize and romanticize, like, oh, this is what we did or whatever. Like, it was fucking hard, man. And we fought and we were confronted with things that made us ultimately stronger, but not necessarily in the day to day.
Yeah,
and there were plenty of times where I had nothing going on and didn't know what to do, and I would go out and do like a 6-hour bike ride, and I'm like, I am mentally ill. Like, what am I doing? Like, why would you, go solve your fucking problem? Call somebody up, get an interview, be practical. There was no indication that anything was ever going to change. So that just seemed like an insane thing to do. It's odd how, in retrospect, you look back and everything lines up and you can kind of craft this tidy narrative around it where it all makes sense. And, oh, yes, you're the protagonist in this hero's journey.
Mate, I have listened. There's a Sam Harris Making Sense of Free Will episode that I've listened to twice now, and I'm barely starting to scratch the surface of it. But what you've just described is like you actually had no choice in the matter. That's just what. That's just how it happened. There's a long story.
But my ego, I'm like very familiar with Sam's take on free will and the kind of non-dualistic nature of consciousness, et cetera. But my ego will take that and say, it's destiny. It's like you were meant for this, and no matter what you did, this is what was going to happen. And I don't think that that's a very healthy way.
No, nor do I. But there's and you've done that many interviews on your show, and as we're coming up on 500 here. The amount of times that it's been told to me, and it's just a reflection of what happened to me. The amount of times that the dream career or the gold medal or whatever it is, the big achievement that is otherwise, somehow observed in our community as this is a thing, you've done a thing. Mm-hmm. The amount of times that it has been, I didn't wait for it. I just did shit every day that put me in the path of it. And eventually the comet showed up. Mm-hmm. But it was hard to stay in the way. It was hard to stay out there, but that's what happened.
But that's the way it's rigged. You're not allowed to see where it's meant to go. And I think that's what creates the paralysis in a lot of people. Like, I have a dream or this thing that I'm working towards, but I need to know how it's going to play out. Or I don't necessarily need to know the ultimate destination, but I kind of need to know what it's going to look like maybe, in 6 months from now. Mm-hmm. And when you can't see that, or that becomes too precarious or obscured, then you're like, well, I'm not going to move because I don't. And it's like, no, this is the way that it is, man. It's like the universe has it rigged. Like, you're not meant to know. What you're meant to do is trust and have faith and put the work in. And each little step that you take forward, you'll get just enough of an indication to keep you in the game, and that's it. And it's really on you to have that Jedi disposition to keep going when you're not necessarily seeing evidence that it's going to play out the way that you would like.
And the other thing is you have to enjoy it just completely detached from consequences. You've got to enjoy it detached from consequences.
And that was the thing with the podcast too. Like, even though I was doing it for free, it was very nourishing. It was like I got to sit down with cool people, learn from them. I got to share it, not with a big audience, but with people who were actually extracting value from it. And so that made me feel good and gave me a sense of the work that I was doing to have some kind of meaning. And it was growing. So I was like, I think this is worthy of my time, even though it doesn't necessarily make financial sense.
Yeah.
there was a sense of excitement around this emerging form of media.
Yeah.
Like, and I, not that I could have imagined that it would become this thing like where so many people listen to podcasts now, but there was a feeling of possibility around what it could be that was enough to kind of keep me invested in it.
It's even if you're, this is a bit of a stretch now, but even if, I don't know, 80 people listen to it, right? This is the mental equivalent of going for that walk around the block. If that's all you can do, that's fine. Do it. Do it every day. Do it every day. Do it once a week. But it builds a muscle within you. It builds a way of thinking within you. It builds a way of your brain working. I'm very grateful to have income from this because it pays its own way now, which is nice. But I reckon I'd still do it, because it keeps the blade sharp. I improve as an interviewer. I found my writing is so much better because I have these conversations with people, and I just adore the bout of conversation. I feel healthier mentally for doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And on top of that, our sense of perception is so warped. Like you said, like even if only 80 people are listening to it, and I was imagining like IRL, like if you got together and had a conversation and 80 people showed up in person to listen to you do it, like wow, like 80 people took time out of their day to listen to me do a thing with other people. Like that's unbelievable. And now it's like, well, only 100. I only got 100,000 views on this video. It's like, I mean, it's like that's the size of a large football stadium.
Yeah, it's
like
colossal.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah,
so we need to like really check ourselves a little bit in the content creation space.
I did a whole episode about.
Like,
we did this one show on a Friday, and we sold it out in I think it was 115 seater. We sold it out. And I'm like, fuck yeah, it was amazing. The next week, I think 8 people bought tickets. And I'm like, what a kick in the dick. Like it was like I had let my ego go and I did that. No, I didn't. It was, and I did a whole show about it. And it's been really interesting doing this live show. I've been trying to be as open as I can with everyone about, because eventually it's going to end up on TV. Like it just is. Everyone that's seen it that works in the industry goes, oh yeah, this is a TV show.
It's a show.
And so I'm kind of almost documenting the ups and downs of it all as we go, and really balking it. Am I really going to talk about the fact that yes, it was a full theater, but for every $20 ticket, I had to spend about $8 on marketing to get them in there? Yeah, I'll talk about that because that's the reality of it. And it's really interesting. It's hard, but it's really it's fascinating. And it's this stuff that we're talking about. It's the being okay with it being kind of shit. That's for me, that's every step you take after 30 kilometers in a marathon. That's the thing that gets you where you want to go. It's the holding the runner's medal or holding the t-shirt you got for your fun run or whatever. That's not it. It's the being okay with getting there. That's the thing that you take with you for the rest of your life, and that's the thing that steels you for whatever other challenges you might have.
But I think beyond that, for me, when I look at what you're doing, what I see is somebody who's not afraid to try to grow creatively. Like you could just do these TV gigs and then like do your podcast where you have conversations. It's comfortable. You're very good at it. You're like, you have this skill set that's marketable, and you could just focus on the things that create predictable income to support your family. And instead you're like, no, I want to do this wacky. I'm going to dye my hair blonde and wear crazy glasses and get all these people up on stage and do a semi-improv news weird like you don't have to do that. I'm sure it's super fun, but you're like, no, this is where my creative muse is taking me.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a business plan. Maybe it turns into a TV show, maybe it doesn't. But what I see is somebody who's doing something for the joy of doing it and the creative kind of exploration of what it would like to do something like that. And I think that that's cool and ballsy.
Thanks, man.
And fun and, allows you to stay fresh with the way that you show up and express yourself in the world. Like, it's I'm like, how does that guy have the time? It's like all I do is this one podcast and I'm tripping, because I got to do 3 interviews and you probably do, I don't know, like it just seems like to me, I look from the outside looking in, like I'm all up in my head and nervous and like, I got to make this conversation perfect. And you're just like ripping off this and that and the other. And like, so kind of with ease, like gear shifting between, different ways of how you kind of ply your craft. And you seem to do it with like, in a way that doesn't drain you, but actually like nourishes you.
Thanks, man. If that's the way it looks from the outside, that's good.
I'm just saying that's the perception. Now I'll tell you like, and just, just so I'm transparent about the whole thing.
Yeah.
We were talking on the car ride over here. Like I just flew to Australia. The reason I'm here is I'm giving a keynote up on the Gold Coast to a group of real estate professionals at this big conference. I just found out because I've been literally like operating day to day, like what's the next fly swat in front of me because I've been so busy, and I just kind of getting into the material. Okay, what am I doing? It's like, oh, it's in front of 3,000 people,
Sick.
And then I'm like I haven't given a keynote since like before the pandemic.
Yeah,
and the whole thing is like, get up, inspire these people, motivate them. I woke up this morning, I've got this lower back issue and I could like barely sit up in bed. I don't feel good in my body. I haven't been able to like use my body in the way that makes me feel like me, which means I'm more out of shape than I would like. I feel flabby. I feel frail because I'm trying to solve this issue that's been really pesky. And the juxtaposition, once again, being in this position where there's an external perception of who I am and what I do and how I live. And then there's like my lived reality, which is very different. And I don't like that. I want to live in integrity where there's no dissonance between who I am, externally versus internally, right? And how do I, inspire people and tell that story when I actually don't, like I'm going to go and tell these stories about things that I've done, but like internally I'm not feeling like that guy right now.
Well, I'm about to help you write your keynote, mate.
Okay.
And I'll be more than like I can if we sit down and put it together. But
like I said, it's very confronting of my identity. It's like, oh, this is who you are. You're the guy who does this, and I'm like, not right now. That's not how I feel.
And you're about to speak to 3,000 people who've just gone through probably 2 straight decades of unfucking precedented growth in real estate in Australia. Real estate in Australia is pretty weird because you can negatively gear investment properties. So the gap between what your renter pays and you as a landlord pay, you can write down. All right. So people just collect these fucking things like it's actual real life monopoly, and it's causing a humongous crisis because people now can't afford to rent, and it's really fucked. So these people have been, that you were speaking to, these real estate agents they've got themselves into an industry that the hockey stick is only going one direction the entire time they've worked there. And in the last 2 years, they have seen for the first time, after record-breaking profits for decades now, they have seen the market tank for the first time that they, since the 90s, right? You're faced with these guys and girls who have got themselves into big mortgages, house payments, car payments, private schools, all this kind of shit. And suddenly...
Because there was an expectation that growth would continue
forever.
In perpetuity.
This fucking ride's never stopping. And now 25% of that. Like, what? So the skills that they've never had to use the skills of getting out of bed and looking at their charts and going, oh, fuck. They've never had to do that. And so what you're able to do is go, I've had, 3 fucking decades of physical unbelievableness, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm faced with this now. And so what have I learned from, day 2 of Ultraman, like knowing you've got another day to go? What have I learned from that I use today when I can't tie my own shoelaces? Like this morning on Broadbeach here in the convention center with you. And that, mate, is going to get them on their fucking feet at the end of the show, because that is you talking to them in the language that they understand. 15, 20% of their bottom line is gone. I mean, if I look at you now, you look at any other man your age, you are still going to be fitter than a lot of them. That's just who you are. But your baseline of what is fit is, and how you can move, and your nimbleness is very, very different to a normal punter. And I reckon that is a gift that you could give them, mate.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's great advice. And it's like triggering. It's like, because of course I don't want to, it's like, that's what, like, I don't want to be vulnerable in that way, but that is the shit. Like, this is what,
what my man would say?
Real.
my man David would say when I was like, oh man, I can't go to meetings down here in Sydney. I don't know if you realize I'm really fucking famous. I don't want to put my hand up. And he goes like, shut the fuck up. Put your hand up. You're going to save someone's life. Okay. That's what David would tell you.
I take it David's your sponsor out here.
Yeah. Okay. I don't call him my sponsor on this show. I call him my mentor.
All right.
And this is the thing, you know, I mean, you and I are on a journey of sobriety. In this journey, I am not the captain of my ship. Oh my goodness, no. No, there's a guy at the helm called David who I call and ask and, you know, ask him about all, you know, questions. Should I turn left? Should I turn right? I don't know what to do here. There's a big storm coming. I normally do this. Or I've just fucking smashed it into some rocks. Okay. Which way are you pointing the wheel? At the rocks. Okay. Do you need to go say sorry to someone? Yes. You know, sorry. Like, you know, the idea of having someone to guide you is often beyond a lot of men, particularly because we want to be the guy, the fucking guy, fucking man, blah, 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 blah. How did you come to the idea of having, you know, you've been a competitive swimmer in your youth, so a coach was always a part of it. What about when it came to my choices about, you know, how I live my life? Were you more reluctant to kind of let that stuff go?
Of course. You know, you're expected to have that figured out. It's so fucking insane because as an athlete, my whole life, I had a coach. That coach would tell me what to do. I would do it. I would have success. Or if I had failure, I had somebody to talk to figure out why I failed and figure out a better path forward. And then you're just kind of out in the world. It's just, and you have nobody to like, and you're like 18, you're 20 or something like that. Yeah. I remember like, and here's the other, like, I remember, like, I actually enjoyed law school. Like, I enjoy being in a structured environment where it's like, here's what you're doing, you know? And I found, even though I was out of my mind drinking and like whatever, like, still, like, you know, I kind of enjoyed the academic challenge, the intellectual challenge of that. And then I'm in a law firm and I have no idea how to be a lawyer. Yeah. Like, there was nothing about law school that taught me how you're supposed to actually function in a professional environment. I was like, I have a secretary. Like, how are you supposed? What am I supposed to tell that person to do? Like, I don't know. You're like, I don't need your help. Like, I guess, like, wait. There's word processing and like copy machines and like motion practice and there's nobody to say like, here's how this works. Like, let me show you how to like be effective in this environment and here's what you're actually doing. And I just floundered, you know, and I think that's a common thing, but you don't like raise your hand and say, hey, can somebody come and tell me what to do or mentor me
because
or whatever?
The cutthroat nature of it is like he can't handle himself.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. You can't like show that you don't know what's happening. Yeah. So we have coaches in sports, and we all understand the value proposition of that. It would be insane not to have a coach. Why don't we have coaches in life? Why don't we have coaches within our respective careers? And why is the onus on the young person to like seek out some mentor who's supposed to then give, you know, freely of themselves? Like that's a lot of pressure to put on a young person, especially in an environment where professionally, at least, you're taught from a very early age that to show any kind of weakness or vulnerability or to say, I don't know is a sign of weakness that will count against you. Right. Like,
well, let me ask you a question.
And how many years do we play that out? And, you know, like, and men, you know, the way that men interact with each other socially, you know, friendships, you know, aren't necessarily, you know, intimate in that way. It's about drinking buddies and watching sports and having a good time or whatever. Women, I think, are inherently wired, you know, for more intimate connection with their friends than men are for whatever reason, genetically and socially. But it's a problem. And I think there's a lot of men that suffer, you know, silently. And both you and I had the good fortune to hit the wall. The elevator crashed all the way to the bottom and gave us no choice because we got so disassembled and deconstructed and demolished that we had to.
I winched mine back up a few times and we kind of like kept crushing until there was not a lot left inside the elevator car.
There's a gift when when the rug gets completely pulled out from underneath you and you have no choice and your ego is so demolished that you have to ask for help. Yeah. And not only do you have to ask for it, you have to receive it, and you have to receive it with humility, and then you have to act on it. And there's a lot of, you know, value and wisdom in that. But the truth is, like, you don't have to crash your car or let that elevator go all the way to the bottom. You can raise your hand at any time and ask for help. It's just fucking harder. You know, it's harder when you're not in pain to let other people into your life and share with them your secrets and your vulnerabilities that we hold so tight, because if anybody knew, then, my life would end. The shame that keeps men locked down is of epidemic proportions. We all know guys, you go to a cocktail party or at a dinner party, and you meet these dudes and you're like, how you doing? Oh, great, man. They're just, the mask is so powerful. Julie calls them super dupers. How you doing? Like super,
That's a great name.
Super dupers.
I love it.
And you're like, oh yeah. You can just tell, you're like, oh, there's a lot going on with that person. And they got it locked down so hard. And I have a lot of compassion for that. I know what it's like to navigate the world that way. And that's the way that, society is structured. And I think what's so powerful about what you're doing and the kind of truth and honesty that you bring around, the mental health conversation is really important, because you're giving other men permission to look inward and confront their own shame and their own, kind of private demons. And I'm sure there's no shortage of men who, as a result, have then raised their hands and gotten help they've needed.
Well, it is in that, you speak about getting taught, I went to an all boys school, which was the sons of the landed gentry and their doctors and lawyers. My parents were the doctor part. And there was none of that. And if someone had just said, the analogy would be, if you're lost and you're trying to get from here to there and you don't know, it's pre-GPS, right? If you don't know where you're going, is it smart to just keep fucking driving? Or, particularly if you're running late, and it's really important that you really want to get there, it's a smart thing to do to pull over and ask someone. You could just keep fucking driving, run out of gas, and, then miss all the opportunities. Or you could pull over and say, hey, do you know how to get there? They go, yeah, it's that way. I'll jump in and drive you. Oh, my friend's on the way. Oh, fuck, of course the idea is to ask someone, all right? But Jesus Christ, man, my life, my career, when I started realizing that the limits of my ideas, or the, familiar parlance would be my own best thinking, but the limits of my own ideas, my own tools, once I started realizing, this is as far as I can go with all the best that I can do, I'll just ask someone who knows how to get from here to there. And that...
Wait, you could do that?
That's the thing. Things just exploded from there. Like this idea that I have to be able to do everything to completion by myself perfectly, that is complete malarkey. The idea of I don't know what I'm doing, so I ask someone to, what days should I lift what weights in what order? Okay.
That's the guy.
He wrote the thing,
that guy.
And I do that, and it's great. I don't know what to do. He does. I just do what he tells me. Guess what happens? What he told me would happen. That's what fucking happens. It's the same with eating. It's the same with, and certainly the same with my doctors. Now, I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to fucking hear them when they were telling me all these diagnoses. I didn't want to be the guy that had that. And I had to get literally kicking and screaming. I had to get dragged over the line and just, find humility before it finds you. Before it fucking found me in a ball of, passive and active suicidal ideation hiding on a fucking hotel bed before I realized, Jesus, I am probably going to have to take these meds because I can't do this by myself. And guess what happened when I took the meds? Things started getting better. Because I was really fucking sick. I was really, really sick. But I didn't want to accept it. And even worse, Rich, he says, here's this antipsychotic. Take it only when you need it. And I'm like, brilliant. If I don't take it, I don't need it. I'm not sick. I was fucking so sick. But I just had to be in acceptance that my ideas weren't going to do it. Like, you can't use a brain that's sick to think your way out of the problems caused by a brain that's sick.
Right. The brain that created the problem can't be relied upon to solve that problem.
And understanding that
you need an external brain.
Is really, really hard. And I was so lucky because, and it all happened in order, Rich. I got diagnosed with PTSD, and then, years later I got sober, and I kind of learned all these ways of not necessarily questioning reality, but understanding that feelings aren't facts. And understanding just because my body feels this horror or this shame or this rage doesn't mean that there's a valid reason for that. It'll never, ever knew that was a possibility. And that in itself changed my life. But it all kind of happened in order. And then I learned how to meditate. I remember Mum taking us to this. The only place you could learn meditation in Brisbane was a Krishna place. So she taught us, we went to this weird Krishna joint, and weird because it smelled funny. At the time, I didn't know what it was. It was chickpeas cooking. Yeah. And now I love that smell.
Just the Hare Krishna, ashram where they have the open kitchen. And
something like that.
The one, there's the one in LA that,
It was up in Brisbane. And I remember us kids were just sat there and stared at a red light on the wall. And I remember it being really interesting. I was about 6 or 7, I think. But I learned to meditate more as an adult.
I didn't know that you were exposed to that at such a young age.
Mum was real into it. Mum was really into yoga. My dad was really into meditation. My dad ran a whole... as a rheumatologist, he was starting a study on meditation and relaxation and chronic pain management in 1979. But we then moved up to Brisbane, and I think he was going to do a PhD or something like that. We had all these cassette tapes of him doing relaxations. So my parents were really into that kind of, and this is nearly 50 years ago. It's all very science-based kind of shit. They were very sciencey people. But it was only in meditation, in the observance of my own thought, that I realized, oh, wow, I'm actually nuts. Oh, that's interesting. And I called my man, David, and he says, you're lucky, pal. And I've been told, some people don't like this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. He said, you're lucky because crazy people don't know they're crazy. You're lucky because if you've never been taught or never realized that your own thoughts or your own assessment of the situation might not actually be what it is, particularly if you're really stressed and anxiety or depression is playing a part, you may not realize that you are reacting to a distorted version of what's actually happening. And your actions and thoughts and whatever don't match the situation and are probably going to make it way, way worse. But I never got taught that.
That's powerful.
It's true though, right? And that's the thing we try to teach Wolf, He's an amazing kid, and people ask me all the time, what would you teach? What would you say? Because they come after you speak, people come up and talk to you. And they go, oh, yeah, my dad's fucking, oh, yeah, my mum, I'm fucking, they kind of whisper it because they've got the shame of, they hear you talking about alcohol. I did it yesterday, talk about alcohol and stuff like that. And people come up to me afterwards going, yeah, I really needed to hear that, mate. Thanks, man. I say, good. They always ask about their kids. I say, just teach them down regulation. Just teach them how to, if I knew that, if I knew that one skill, it would have changed so much in my life. It would have changed those understanding when my body was flooded, and that whatever I say I'll do next is probably just going to make this way worse. If I knew to take it just a breath, life would have been very different. And we teach that to Wolfie now. We call them snake breaths.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And he's also got this, he's upstairs. He's got this like kind of articulated ball that looks like it belongs on a space station. Those things, they pack up real tight and you pull one end and it just goes, becomes this gigantic globe.
Yeah.
And he calls it his breathing ball. So he breathes in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice, man.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, there's nothing, he's just a kid being a kid.
Right.
But when when toddlers, they've got no impulse control. So their brain, that's the other wild thing. He's got no impulse control. So his brain is so undeveloped, and watching just this kind of raw toddler flail around the room going, add tequila and, stimulants, and that's me.
Yeah.
In my 30s.
Yeah, I know. It's the same thing. Yeah.
And then having to learn that as an adult, it's reflecting a lot on me. I think about you a lot, as a parent, certainly as you became a step parent before you became a natal parent.
So when I met Julie, they were like 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And Julie was coming out of that marriage. And so they've been in my life, almost their entire lives and have lived with us even through the early years, like more than they were with his dad, although their dad, was a very strong presence in their life and a really cool guy. And now that he's gone, it was really painful when he died. So that was like, I think it was 7 years ago. And so, my role kind of changed when that occurred, but they were already kind of old enough where it was really just more support at that time.
Yeah.
But they're amazing kids, and it's just like, and what's been great. So they're like 28 and 26 now.
Jesus Christ, they were teenagers when I met them. God, I'm so old.
But before the pandemic, they had moved out. They were living in Echo Park and they're pursuing their music career.
That's right.
And then when
tweed jackets
happened,
and such.
when lockdown happened, they moved back, which was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And they're still at home. And it's been such the pandemic, all of that, the worst. But the silver lining in our family was that it brought them back home, and our relationship is been so much closer as a result.
Yeah.
And also it's been such a benefit for my other two kids to have them around. They're amazing guys. And Tyler actually does a lot of work for me now. Trapper does too a little bit, but like Tyler is super into doing all kinds of stuff at our podcast studio, and it's been great to like have him around. He's so smart, and he's like, you should do this and you should do that. And I was like, yeah, why didn't I think of that? I was like, you sure you want to do this music thing? Because I could literally, have you, be here full time.
Yeah, wow.
So
you came to parenting with, already fully formed, small children, without having that kind of, and I've seen it now with Wolf. You get a couple of months of grace. Learning how to do it. You kind of fuck it up when they're babies. You're like, sorry, I don't have any idea how to do this part or that part of it. But by the time they're 3 or 4, like that's like everything I say and do is going into a permanent record that will be replayed back for the rest of their life. I really got to be careful.
Yeah. Well, to Julie's credit, though, in the early years of our relationship, like my exposure to them was very gradual and very mindful, because we didn't know if we were going to be together, and so it took a long time before like my life integrated with those boys. So we tried to do that as responsibly as possible, also out of respect to their father. So I did have a ramp up, like a gradual kind of slow exposure to them that made it a little bit easier.
We went
and also, I didn't have to slot in and be dad because I had a dad, so I was kind of like cool uncle for a while. Yeah, and then the role kind of grew from there. But it is the hybrid family thing, like. Listen, I met Julie when I had a year of sobriety. She's really the only relationship I've had in sobriety. Yeah. And that first year of sobriety, I was celibate. Like, it was strongly suggested that, hey, you probably shouldn't date because like you're like women is a big trigger for you. Like, this is very tied into like your drinking and your using. And that year was really revelatory of like, okay, I'm not putting that energy out. I'm not doing that. And I learned a lot about myself. And then when I kind of came out of that year feeling whole, I met Julie.
I looked up from a downward dog and there she was.
I was coming out of a marriage disaster. And I thought like, well, my next relationship, it's going to be, a woman who's younger than me, who, no drama. Like, I just want like a nice person, like easy, And then I meet Julie coming out of a divorce, two young children, older than me, and it just didn't make any sense on paper. But the heart wants what the heart wants. And
man, she's a beaming sunshine all to herself. She has an uncommon energy about her.
That's very true.
But when Audrey and I were the same, Audrey was very, very careful around G. And when it came time for us all to move in together, we went and saw a psychologist down the children's hospital here. They even have it's a free clinic, free healthcare, man, and gun control. Maybe you want to go back to your friends over there and talk about it.
Listen, I've made no secret of my love for Australia. Like, I'm basically here all the time.
But it's so we went down there and it was, I don't know shit about, being the mum's boyfriend, then fiance, then husband, moving into a relationship where the child is 10, then 11, and then coming into, being a teenager as puberty hits right at this really crucial point of all us cohabitating. I don't know anything about that or how to do the right thing. So we went and talked to this person. Like, did I get it right? No. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. Do I still make mistakes? Yes. It has been revealed to me that is a part of being a parent. You do get it wrong, as much as you wish you were perfect. And, I know, like, there'll be a part when I'm, 10 years, 20 years from now when it's going to be, that's fine. That's all a part of it. That's a part of it, man.
Of course. Listen, you do the best that you can with what you have, right? And no matter what you do, the story, you know, that they're going to tell themselves about who you are and how you were lacking and, you know, whatever pain they're, you know, it's like, okay, that's what it's going to be, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. Cause, you know, with kids that are older now and being able to see when they say, well, why did this happen? He's like, come on, man. I tried, you know?
Yeah, I did. It's a moment, isn't it? I remember, I think I was about like 18 or 19. I'm lucky that I'm 2 of 4 boys, so we can talk about, you know, and, you know, you talk about perception of a situation, you know, you can kind of bounce it around a couple of ideas and then basically come down to a synthesis of, maybe like get the actual vibe of what actually went down on that day versus just my perspective. And then you kind of realize, they were just doing the best they could with what they had at the time. Oh, okay.
My parents were so young. And I've held on to so many resentments about this and that. And then I'm like, dude, what were you doing when you were 26, 20? You know, like I'm trying to imagine, you know, it allows me to have so much more compassion for them.
And that's it's hard. I think you got to be adult by the time you get to that. It's hard to do when you're a teenager,
of course,
because it's far out, man. You spoke about the trying to do 50,000 things at once, but.
And then you go on Instagram and you like, I don't know what your experience is, but like there's a whole like super dad core thing of like dads being super dads. And like, you know how like, mental health and Instagram, like that's the thing that makes me feel like shit when I see dads like doing something amazing with their kids. And then I think, man, I really, you know, like I fucked up.
Mate.
You know, and I'm like, I can't look at this stuff.
I try to keep away from it. Like I fail. The addiction's so fucking terrible, mate. Like at one point I had Audrey have my screen time passcode, like I'm a 10-year-old boy, and I still found ways around it.
Yeah, I know. I think there's been a couple times where I like DM'd you on Instagram and there's an auto reply saying you don't see this.
That's been really helpful. Yeah. That's been really helpful, because then if you know me and you want to speak to me, you text me. Oh yeah, email me, which is good. Part of the thing around when Georgia came into my life, and this really helped in the kind of sobriety stakes, there was this one day where suddenly it was no longer about me. Suddenly it was just everything has to be about making sure this kid gets every chance at life that she wants. And that unleashed this whole kind of fire within me to just create and make and build and be as good as I can be at every point. And now Wolfie's here as well. It's the kind of decisions I made when I was drinking and using extended to financial decisions, Rich. So I kind of came out of that with somewhat of an empty water tank.
Addiction tends to, you know, create some pretty, you know, tricky financial predicaments, debt, and like, you know, like
how many $100,000? What's the return? Brilliant, I'm in.
Taxes, you know, credit cards. Oh my God.
Investment opportunities.
My credit was so destroyed that I just had made like I never thought I would ever have 2 nickels to rub together. Wow. I was convinced that I was incapable of being financially stable and that I would never be able to even like lease a car or do anything, you know? So the fact that I've crawled out of that, like I thought even with all this success, I was like, I'll never repair my credit. It's just because of my drinking and using and my irresponsibility. It was just beyond anything that could ever be fixed.
Yeah,
it's fixed. Like I'm like, I have no fucking idea.
That's amazing. You know, I have quite a problem with that whole American credit score thing. It happens here too now, because it's very weird. It's like this almost a Black Mirror, almost level of social judgment that is just it's quite shit and quite controlling, and it's up there with university debt. But look, that's a whole other conversation.
It's a different thing,
for a whole other time. I started this podcast because when I was in the worst of it, I did not know what else it could look like. I didn't know what sobriety could look like until I heard other people who had been where I was and were now somewhere where I wanted to be tell me, oh no, this is it. I'm here. I'm married again. You know, finances are okay. Got 2 kids. It's life's. Stick at it, mate. Stick at it. I didn't know that could exist. It may as well have been a fucking fairy story. But it was only in hearing those stories and hearing those conversations that I started to believe, well, maybe there might be they can't be making this up. Maybe they might, because I knew everything, you know. And so I started this podcast because I wasn't hearing those kind of conversations on a wider front, you know, like not just about sobriety, not just about mental health, but about climate, about, you know, parenting, about, you know, you can't be what you can't see. I wasn't hearing possibility described or spoken of. So I started this show. And thankfully it's become a lot more normalized now. But I have done this show for nearly over 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And I knew you before I started it. So A, I'm sorry it took me so long to get you on. But
have
B,
I never, is this the only time I've done your thing?
Yeah.
I could have sworn we'd done it.
I was on yours.
You've been on mine
twice.
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry it took me 10 years.
It's
but,
all right.
Mate, I'm fucking glad I waited.
Yeah.
I love you, man. I literally would not be here without you. You got to understand.
I don't know about that, but
I do.
I
take it, mate. Take it.
When you came and picked me up this morning, it was like so nice to see you, man. Like even though we don't see each other that often, I feel very connected to you. And I was reflecting on the history of our relationship, like when we first met and the ripple effect of that. Like even though like since you left Los Angeles, I've only seen you a couple times. Like I stay connected. I follow everything on social media, and we stay in touch, but it's been a couple of years since I've seen you. But, you know, meeting you in LA, spending that time, you're the one who introduced us to Mel Nahas, who's like a central figure in our life. Like she's one of Julie's closest friends and collaborative partners. She produced our retreat. I was just with her in Italy. Like that doesn't happen without you. And like she plays a huge role in our life. And the ripple effect of that is like profound. And that ripple tracks back to another mutual friend of ours that, you know, is very important in my life. I'm not going to name him, but that's the way that sobriety works, right? Like it's kind of a magical, amazing, mystical sort of thing.
And it doesn't need to be, you don't have to get sober to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it helps. It helps me because you realize what's at stake, I think, once you get sober. You get sober once you realize, oh, fuck, I nearly lost everything. Okay, all right. I might go about things a little differently. But yeah, I say yes to probably too much stuff, but I also understand that just giving as much as I can for others when I can will always ultimately make my day better. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not this day, but it will. But it will.
Yeah.
But it will. It'll always show up again. And it's much better than running around being a fuckwit, being an asshole and saying no and shouting at people and trying to, no, I want it all. There's all the podcasts. I want all, give me this podcast, that podcast, I want it all. And that TV show as well. Fuck you. Yeah. Like, I've done that. It was not a good time. Living life from a place of scarcity or jealousy was shit.
Yeah. Well, I would say that you have built an admirable life for yourself, my friend. You know, like you have a really healthy marriage and relationship. The mindfulness and intentionality that you bring to your parenting, to the content that you create, like it's inspiring, man. And because I've known you for a long time, and I didn't meet you before you got sober, but I've seen some valleys in your mental health journey that were terrifying.
Yeah.
And I was really scared about whether you were going to be able to like come out the other side of that.
Yeah.
So
you were there. Like that was that. I saw you like 2 days before or the day before when I went proper fucking crazy. I was right on the edge of, I was just starting to see glitches at the end of my vision. I remember being in your garage doing that podcast that day, just starting to see like things pop in to that. Like,
was that the same day that then we did we had like Mel came over and we did like the tea ceremony?
No. That was years later.
That was later,
that was
right?
Later. Yeah,
but that was a moment where I saw like a break in the fabric of your reality. That really scared me. Like we were just having tea, and you were convinced that there was something mind altering in the tea.
Yep.
And you started to have a panic attack about that.
It was terrible.
And it was I wasn't sure what to do.
I drove home.
You started to freak out.
Yeah. I drove home at I reckon in Australian, Or actually, let's be honest, the distance measurement the rest of the world, except for America, uses, I think I must have driven home at like 25 kilometres an hour, 30 kilometres an hour from your place. You said just go that way till you get to PCH and turn left.
You thought that we had like dosed you.
I felt like it, yeah. It was as real as anything. It was absolutely super fucking real. It was terrifying. It was so scary. It was not a fun time. But that's what brains are, man. Brains are why, when brains break, when we detach or when our ability to process reality gets altered, unless you know what's going on, you have no reason to believe it's happening. And so therefore that is the reality that's happening and I'm reacting appropriately.
Right.
And anyone that tells me otherwise, you're fucking here on account, fuck off. It's really scary. It's so scary. But look, not that night, but there's been other nights when I have absolutely ingested mind-altering substances at people's houses and absolutely fucking gone off the edge and experienced, marijuana psychosis or something else. I've absolutely experienced that. So it wasn't my first time lying on someone else's living room floor.
Oh my God. You were so convincing though that I thought, is there something in this? Like I was like, no, this is just tea.
That's part of my job, mate. I'm very good. I'm very emotive when I speak. It's a trap. It was really scary. And that's brains. Brains are scary things. And understanding that they can really, not only can they go really wrong, but also that there's treatment available and you can get healthy and you can be healthy. And it might not be what you thought it was going to be, but the life that I get to live because of the work that I do to stay healthy is amazing. This is the life you're talking about. It is a life of structure. It's a life of making sure I try to stay as fit as I can. It's a life of staying in touch with my doctors. It's a life of taking my meds. It's a life of, deliberately doing things that other people would go, oh no, those things will just happen. They don't just happen if I don't write them down and I don't tick them off a list. And because I do that, the output that I have from a work standpoint is prolific sometimes. And the quality of the moments that I share with my family, I'd like to think, are extraordinarily present because I make a note of it. Put your fucking phone down. Look people in the eye. I have to write that down. I know other people do it automatically. I don't. That's okay. I put a reminder to myself, put your phone down. And then I have these, I'm very lucky to have these, it's a very deliberate way of getting through the day. Because if I just let it just go by itself, it doesn't end in a good spot, essentially. And I have the life I have because of the brain I've got. This is the product of obsessive compulsive disorder and ADHD and PTSD and whatever the fuck else. I'm collecting a whole bunch of disorders. This is what it can. This is it, and I'm grateful for it. There's parts of it that are shit, but there's parts of it that means that I can do things that other people can't. And what did your mate say? Don't be the best, be the only.
Oh, right. Kevin Kelly.
Yeah. That was great. Fuck, that was good. That was a really
I mean, you're definitely the only in the thing that you're doing. That's for sure. There's no, you can't be replaced. There is one Osher energy and you are it.
Well,
but I think, listen, I have so much respect for what you have, how you've comported yourself through your mental health journey, how you took responsibility for it, and really did the work, and then felt this responsibility to share it transparently and vulnerability in a vulnerable way, because that's really what is the point of what you've endured if you can't share what you experienced to benefit other people and hopefully shortcut whatever situation they're in so they didn't have to experience the pain that you experienced. And, these things live on a spectrum, and what you endured was very extreme, right? And not everybody is going to have, such an extreme experience, but we all have mental health shit that we're going through, right? All of us.
Yeah.
And so I think for anybody who's listening or watching, maybe do that inventory and try to figure out like why you keep doing that bullshit thing that you keep doing that gets you in trouble, whatever it is. And it might be minor. It might just be, why am I always scrolling on my phone, or why do I always end up in the same kind of relationship that ends in this very same way? And realize there's a reason for that. And the answer and the solution will be found through looking inward, raising your hand, asking for help, finding somebody you can trust to talk with, and to kind of flex that muscle of being open and vulnerable with someone, because that shame that's keeping it in a dark corner of your soul thrives in isolation and privacy. And, that shame can't survive the light. And as scary as it is to kind of relate that thing that you would prefer to keep hidden with another human being, that is the path to becoming whole and, being on a more authentic journey for yourself, that will unburden you of the psychic drain that you're carrying and may only be semi-conscious of. But there's a whole other side, waiting for you and a more meaningful kind of purposeful direction for you if you're willing to kind of, shoulder it. And if it's fucking hard, man. And it sucks.
Look, it's
and
not
it's
like
terrible.
it's not.
Like, I don't.
It's not like it's not.
We
We could do a whole we could do 2 straight hours in what you just described is all well and good. And you mentioned it earlier. We could do 2 straight hours on being in action, because that's it. But what you just described, that's.
Well, you're gonna come and do my podcast tomorrow. We'll
can dig into that if you like.
We'll dig a little bit more into that.
Mate, you're fucking amazing. I'm so happy I got you on my life, mate.
I love you, buddy. Happy to be here.